Good afternoon, everyone. We are about to start. Please take a seat. Please, welcome.
This is a mic for the Q&A session. Throw it and catch it and speak. So the what? For somebody who want to ask them, and you speak directly to here.
Okay.
So somebody need to control or manage this maybe in the middle.
Okay. This is a mic. It's for you. Apparently, you know how it works? It's a book. Yes, for the
Asking the
discussion.
question. Exactly. You can touch it. Cool.
We can start.
Yeah. Who are you starting with? You're starting with the LDCs here, right? And then that's.
First, I have to.
Yeah. And then after that, you keep the flow to the. And where's Ben?
Yeah. They gave me some. I have it. Wow.
Please.
As far as I know, sometimes
That's why we trust it. That's a matter.
Okay, we will start our SAD event. Distinguished participants, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Lake Chair, I have the pleasure to welcome you to our Lake SAD event. As most of you all know, this event provides us with an opportunity to collectively discuss the experiences and process made by the least developed countries in addressing adaptation and the support provided to them. Today, we will hear from the chair of the LDCs on the needs of LDCs from support post-Marrakesh, from the leg on the work program for 2017-2018, Liberia on emerging experiences from NAPAs workshops, the CGF secretariats on support to the LDCs on adaptation, the GAF secretariat on funding to the LDCs through the LDCF. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for me to invite Mr. Gebru Jember, the chair of the LDC group, to provide us with highlights on the needs of the LDCs following Marrakesh. Mr. Gribou, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. Ladies and gentlemen, I am an honor to speak on behalf of LDCs at this side event. Please allow me to reiterate our continued pride in the work of the leg in supporting us in the LDCs to tackle adaptation. Their vision is a sentiment to their commitment, and I wish to register my personal support towards making it a reality and to call upon all of you to do so. Let me now take this opportunity to communicate a few issues that are of key importance to the group at this session. Moving forward, first, NAPs are very important for the LDCs, and I'm sure for all other parties in ensuring we can build resilience to climate change and reduce our vulnerabilities before it becomes too costly and our development progress whipped away by the ever-increasing adverse impacts of climate change and variability. We are very concerned at the lack of progress in accessing the GCF for our work on NAPs, despite 2 projects that were approved at the last session in Marrakesh. However, no funding has been dispersed and no new proposals from the LDCs have been approved. We need to find ways to have national implementing entities from the LDCs to be accredited under the GCF to ensure efficient and expedited access to resources and country-driven implementation of our urgent adaptation priorities. This will go a long way to support our adaptation ambitions as articulated in the NDCs. We had the opportunity to have the GCF Secretariat at our coordination meeting this afternoon. We were informed that 16 additional countries have approached for expedite support for the NAP formulation. There were also concerns shared with respect to implementing entities in channeling the fund. We look forward to further engage on these discussions to advance implementation of actions in our countries. Secondly, the NAP Expo that was planned for April this year was cancelled. With NAPs being primary vehicle for our countries for adaptation, the NAP Expo is even more important for LDCs. So we still hope that the Secretariat can raise funds and hold the event before the end of this year. Third, the LDCF remains underfunded, and there is an urgent need to adequately replenish the fund to implement the LDC work program, the NAPAs, and the formulation of NAPs. We thank the developed countries that continue to make contribution to the fund and call upon more to ensure adequate resources in the fund. On the LDC work program, more generally, there is a need to broaden its scope in line with the evolving needs of LDCs as we implement the Paris Agreement. We also look forward for the leg to support us in providing assistance to LDCs with matters relating to accreditation of direct access entities, readiness support, and building implementation strategies for the NDCs. We have heard from the leg that they have had to cancel or postpone some of the priority activities to deliver technical guidance and support to the LDCs. We continue to appeal to developed country parties to provide additional funding for the work of the leg to fully deliver the planned activities. Colleagues, despite the challenges, we continue to do our best with the support that has been made available to us. And for that, let me thank all those parties and organizations that continue to support the LDCs undertake their work on adaptation. I would like also to thank the Secretariat for the continued support that has been provided so far. At this stage, I would like to thank you, and I would like an excuse. I have another commitment, so I need to leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair of the LDCs, for the speech. Are there any specific questions to the LDC Chair? Because he has to leave the room. If any question, please, the floor is open. One there. Just speak.
Well, how do I use this technology? Just speak. Okay. Well, okay. Thanks, Chair of the LDCs, and thanks everybody. For those of you who, I'm just going to contribute to what the Chair of the LDC said. Just to buttress what you have said, because I am one of those that helped develop the LDC work program. This is about 17 years ago. So you will know that that program is a little bit old as I am. So really it needs to be expanded. As the first chair, I have worked on the NAPAs, but the program was not really implemented until afterwards. But right now there are emerging issues for the LDCs. And since parties and the convention were good enough to give us the leg as an advisory body, as a technical advisory body, to support us in implementing the NAPAs and the other LDC program, I think I support what the chair has just said, that this program should be expanded. Because we have now got to implement the NDCs, we have now got to develop the NAPs, we have now got a lot of work to be done, but the LDCs are not accessing funds as easily as the others. So we are again being left behind, especially with the GCF. There are some implementing agencies that are supporting us in our NAP in preparation. For example, I can quote for the Gambia, there is the FAO, who are doing very well to help us develop some issues related to agriculture in our NAPs. But right now, we don't have an accredited entity in the Gambia that can have direct access to these funds. And we believe that, I believe and I know, if we ask the leg to do it for us, they will work towards that and do it for it, because I was the first chair of the leg in 2002. So I definitely support what the chair of the LDCs have just said, that we should broaden the mandate of, the support that the leg is giving to the LDCs, particularly in accreditation and also other areas that are emerging, particularly the NDCs and so on. Thank you. I hope.
Thank you, Bubu. Is there any other question to the chair, LDC chair? If none, again, chair, thank you very much for coming, and we will continue without you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now moving to the second phase of our event, where we shall first get a presentation providing an overview of work program for 2017 and 2018. This presentation will be made by Ms. Beth Lavender, leg member. Ms. Beth, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. It is my honor to be here tonight to talk to you about the current LEG work program, and it is also my continued honor to be a member of the LEG. I think I say this every time I'm at one of these events, but it certainly is. My participation and membership on the LEG over the years has definitely been one of the most rewarding experiences I've had in my experience throughout this process. I think it continues to be a body that does good work and makes a real difference to the countries it engages with and the work that it does. So I'm going to run through. It's a bit of a long presentation, so it's a lot of information. Some of it I might go through a little quickly, but hopefully it will provide you an overview of the work that the LEG is doing now. So it all starts with the vision we had sort of defined within our group as the LEG, and it's also found within the LEG work program and in the SBI document at the bottom of that slide. So essentially, we had a discussion about what we wanted our work to be able to enable, recognizing that we don't actually do the implementation of the work, but we wanted to enable countries to sort of achieve these things. And so we want our work to achieve the existence of well-structured adaptation planning processes in LDCs, support the formulation of robust and good quality NAPs, the implementation of priority adaptation needs identified in the NAPs, and demonstrable results in building adaptive capacity, strengthening resilience, and reducing vulnerability to climate change in LDCs. The work program is, sort of inspired by that vision, the work program is clustered around 4 strategic areas. The first one being direct support to countries. The next one being collaboration with and the provision of inputs to organizations and processes that also provide support to LDCs, for example, with other organizations that are developing guidance, supplements, and that kind of thing. Provision to support to the intergovernmental process, and that means this particular process, the UNFCCC process on adaptation and other related issues for the LDCs, and supporting NAPs and other adaptation processes more broadly. And the rest of the presentation is sort of organized around these 4 clustered groups. The next slide talks about the 10 work areas that we have, and I'm not going to read through all of them. You can find them in the document that's listed there at the bottom. But these are how the 2-year rolling work program is organized within that document. But they are all within the clusters that I'm going to be talking about. Also, before I get into more specifics about the work that the LEG is doing, it is responding to some of the issues that have come out as we talk to other parties in implementation of adaptation and the LEG work program. The first being, what does the assessment of progress on NAPs indicate to be the main obstacles for the LDCs in advancing their NAPs? How is the LEG further guiding technical aspects of the process of formulation of NAPs? What is the latest training approach for NAPs, and how can others complement that? We know there's a lot of various training and guidance and things happening now on NAPs, and we are undertaking a fair bit of effort to make sure, not that it's finely coordinated, but that at least we're all talking to each other, so it's complementary. How can countries synergize work on achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? What are priority needs for guidance and support for the LDCs in post-Paris, taking into account efforts to revise and update the LDC work program for next year? And what are the highlights of work with other bodies and organizations, GCF, Nairobi Work Program, Adaptation Committee, and the TEC, for example? I'll also provide a brief update on the overview, or a brief overview on the status of progress by LDCs on national adaptation plans. Most countries have launched work on NAPs, which is great, at national levels, and many are making efforts to access funding. Some countries are waiting for revised templates from the GCF. So far, GCF has approved 2 project proposals from Liberia and Nepal. The disbursement of funds to countries has not started due to ongoing negotiations on fees between the GCF and UN agencies. 7 countries have completed and submitted their NAPs. Brazil, Burkina Faso, Cameroon, Kenya, Sri Lanka, and the state of Palestine and Sudan. None of these 7 have apparently applied for funding under the GCF for the implementation of their projects or programs. And the status on NAPAs and the LDCF, as of March 2017, 20 NAPA proposals had been technically cleared and were awaiting availability of additional funds within the LDCF. I think, as we all know, the LDCF has run out of funds right now to meet the demand of NAPAs. And in total, since its establishment in 2001, 248 NAPA projects have been approved for funding under the LDCF. There are a few emerging challenges that we're aware of in our work relating to the formulation and implementation of NAPs. The first 2 relate to accessing funding through the GCF or getting national entities accredited under the GCF, including for readiness. The next one is how to manage synergy on NAPs and adaptation with the SDGs as well as other frameworks, recognizing that climate change touches on a lot of different things, and in order for adaptation measures or solutions to be effective, they need to take these other things into account. And sometimes within governments, as we all know, it's a little bit difficult for those 2 groups or several groups to work together effectively as they should. How to build adequate and lasting technical capacity and adaptation processes over time that are robust and will last longer than it takes to develop the National Adaptation Plan. How to build on existing programs and activities at the national level, and how to effectively address both objectives and all guiding principles of the process to formulate and implement NAPs. We have started to do some work on an integrated framework for the NAPs and the SDGs, because there is a lot of interrelationships between the 2. And we've developed the NAP SDG iframe. And it really is aimed at managing the achievement of the SDGs in the face of climate change. As I mentioned before, climate change will affect many of the SDGs directly and others indirectly. So we developed this approach, which is, it's new and we are piloting it, but it so far has been working quite well. And we're doing that through the NAP workshops to assess and act on systems or management units that can look at both the development and the climate change influences on it. The approach makes it easier to manage the synergy between the development and adaptation goals, including documenting outcomes to support measuring and evaluation of SDGs and adaptation concurrently. So the next 2 slides might scare you, because they scared me when I first saw them. But really, I'm not going to talk you through them. They're just to indicate really where the interrelationships are, and there are a lot of them. And the benefit of having this iframe to make the work more. Yeah, that's worse, isn't it? I mean, like the first one you can sort of see, but this one, I don't. Anyway, this one is just another way of of explaining the interrelationships that were in the first slide. So there are a lot of them. I'm not going to talk through. But essentially, the framework takes an integrated approach towards country-driven and country-specific descriptions of systems that should be managed to achieve adaptation, as well as the SDG targets. The combination of SDGs and climate risk factors help in the selection of systems. So instead of looking at specific or very narrow sectors, it broadens that look, the look to more systems. For example, for food security, the systems would include crop production, distribution, affordability, food reserves, and over time, as well as nutritional value. So you're really looking at the whole system instead of really small snapshots of it. The component systems can be assessed for climate change adaptation, taking into account the interlinkages with other sectors, and adaptation actions prioritized and implemented. When you're looking at your trade-offs, you have a much better picture of what you're actually trading off in terms of both climate change adaptation and development. After implementation, outcomes would accrue adaptation benefits as well as sustainable development benefits, both which can be monitored and documented. And so the next diagram will talk about the technical steps And these were, as I mentioned before, piloted through the NAP workshop that we had in Malawi in February. So the next slide looks at, it's the starting point for this slide is element B of the NAP technical, or the NAP technical guidance. So the first, oh yeah, you can't read it. So the first box there takes the development context, which you've sort of developed through your element A of the NAP guidelines. And the next two boxes there is really where you start to apply or start to put an SDG lens on the top of them, so that you're mapping climate change to the SDGs or the SDGs to climate change. And then you're identifying, the next step is you're identifying the systems. So it really doesn't change the process you would follow in the NAPs. It just provides an additional lens on top of it into that guidance. So that at the end, the last two boxes here is where you come out with your synergy and trade-off analysis. And this, as I mentioned before, allows for a better understanding of what your trade-offs are as you're choosing what adaptation options to undertake or not, and where the trade-offs will come from in the bigger development context. There is a lot more information about this SDG iframe, or the NAP SDG iframe, which you can, if you're interested, can look into. And I won't spend a lot more time going through that here. So moving on to the rest of our of the areas of work that we do, I think one of the most important or most productive things that we do are the NAP, the technical workshops. They're really to support countries in designing assessments of climate risk and vulnerability. They support countries in the design and implementation of NAPs and accessing funding, and provide a platform for countries to share experiences and lessons and promote best practices, and really to promote South-South and regional collaboration on NAPs. So these are regional training workshops that we have. The photo is from Malawi. So how we run the things that we talk about in the workshops, they really follow a bottom-up approach of working through the NAP SDG iframe, as we just talked through. They also work through the process and they arrive at a pilot NAP, so that while they're at the workshop, they can go from start to finish and have a sort of a pilot NAP that applies to their own circumstances. All the work is iterative and ongoing, and just like the NAP process itself within a country, they feedback into each other, and they gradually build up the capacity for adaptation activities over time. We also develop what we're calling open NAPs, which is there are real cases for real countries, provide the concrete materials and examples for the delivery of the training. So this is our schedule for the upcoming year. We have had the first workshop, as I mentioned, in Malawi in February, March of this year. We have 4 more planned for this year. One in Asia, one in the Pacific, one for Francophone countries, and one for the Americas and the Caribbean, and that will benefit non-LDCs as well, and particularly Haiti, which is the only LDC in the Americas. A little bit more about the open NAPs. They're developed in an open collaboration with interested partner organizations and experts to offer direct support to countries, specifically for their work on NAPs. We've launched these for an initial set of countries, and we're open to requests from other countries if they are interested, and they enable experts to work together with the country very specifically on NAPs, and for country teams to take advantage of the wide expertise and resources to advance their work. In terms of our collaboration for the provision of inputs to organizations and processes that provide support to LDCs, we're working with the GCF Secretariat in supporting countries to access funding from the GCF for NAPs. The engagement, I understand the GCF Secretariat was at the NAP workshop in Malawi for the whole workshop, and from what I was not there, but I heard from others who were that was very, very much appreciated and very helpful for all the participants there. The GCF Secretariat was also able to attend our March leg meeting here in Bonn, also very much appreciated. It does speaking from my experience as a leg member, it really does help us when we can interact with them one-on-one and over a period of a little bit of a period of time, so people can have those conversations both within the meeting and in the hallway. We've developed a navigation guide to assist LDCs in accessing funding from the GCF, and we've done that in collaboration or at least in consultation with the GCF. And at SBI 45 requested the leg to consider ways to further enhance the provision of support to LDCs for accessing funding from the GCF for NAPs. So this is also contained in the leg report to SBI. The provision of support to the intergovernmental process, again, that's this process in particular, the UNFCCC process. We're supporting the assessment of progress of implementation of the LDC work program and future revisions and updates. The SBI assessment of progress made in NAPs. So the leg is undertaking various activities to prepare for the review. The comprehensive information is needed for the review. So there is an online questionnaire. I think it's on NAP Central. Yeah. So it's really important for those of you who haven't taken a look and filled out the questionnaire to do so, because that will give us the information we need to do as much of a comprehensive review as we can. And finally, addressing the Paris Agreement related mandates to the adaptation and the adaptation committee and the leg from Decision 1 CB21. We have a special event, joint adaptation committee leg side event on 12th of May. I think that's Friday. To share progress on our work so far and to get feedback. And again, it's very important that we get feedback if you're able to come. It's a 3-hour session. And we do need feedback on this work, as it is quite challenging and quite important work. In terms of supporting NAPs and other adaptation processes more broadly, the NAP Expo. The event in April was canceled due to the high cost for organizing the event. It was regrettable, and I think a lot of people were disappointed, including the leg itself, but it was a decision that had to be made. So we're planning to hold the next one next year, so in April 2018. There are regional NAP Expos being planned. I guess the one scheduled right now is Uganda in June. I think there may be talk about having another one later in the year. So these are not the big global NAP Expos, but they're regional NAP Expos that we are encouraging, we're participating in and encouraging other organizations to organize on the margins of events that are already happening. So there are things that can be more regionally focused that will complement the global NAP Expo, and of course the technical papers and guidelines that the leg is producing. This slide just summarizes the latest updates from NAP Central. So there's this NAP progress tracker on NAP Central. There's a snapshot at the bottom of the information that's there, but there is a lot more information there, including the country-specific information when you dig down into the things that you're interested in. And the information from there is extracted from the questionnaires and surveys that we conduct with countries during leg events. So I'm almost done, the last 2 slides. Here's a snapshot of the NAP global calendar. So as I mentioned before, we are working hard to coordinate or at least collaborate on training and related activities. There is a lot going on. I'm sure we all know that there is a lot going on NAPs right now. And then finally, to wrap up, these are the leg members, the current leg members. There are a few of us here in the room, and I think there's also several former members in the room. I won't go through them all. I won't read them out. And that's it. So thank you very much for your attention and your support of the leg and its work.
Thank you very much, Beth, for the presentation. Are there any specific questions on the work program? Where is the microphone? Oh.
Okay. So thank you so much for the comprehensive presentation. It is a very brief one. My name is Nidal. I'm from Palestine. Only on the NAB Expo. I recall that the first NAP Expo I attended, it was during the bond session 2 years or 3 years ago, maybe in Beethoven House, maybe 2013 or 14. So it was very helpful to have it, the NAP Expo in parallel with the bond session. So I think it was a lot of cost will be decreased by this, having this parallel session during the bond session. Thank you.
Any other question? Please, ladies at the phone. Oh,
Wow.
My name's Merlin Hedger, and I'm the research
please, you have the microphone. This one is the microphone. Yeah. The black.
Okay, sorry, after all
Yeah.
that success, failure. My name's Merlin Hedger, and I'm a research associate at the Overseas Development Institute, and we work on climate finance. I'm also an advisor to the Global Water Partnership. I know I've been working on that guidance. I might be out of order in asking this question now, but what's the leg line on NDCs and the relationship of NAPs to NDCs? Do you see NAPs essential inputs to NDCs, or if there isn't a NAP, would you go straight to an NDC?
Okay.
It's just that for funding, it's quite confusing for people like us who are on the edge, outside.
Okay, is there any questions? So maybe you can group the question to facilitate Betty to answer.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Peter Witt. I'm working with CARE Denmark, and we support southern civil society networks engaging in the NAP processes in a number of least developed countries. So my question is, this new concept of the open NAP, what's the relationship between that and the general, more comprehensive NAP guidelines? That's the first question, and then I'm curious also to learn what is the relationship between all the NAP workshops you are arranging and then the NAP Expo, which was cancelled this year, and we were also one of those organizations. A bit disappointed because we had looked forward to it. And lastly, it was disappointing to see that there were some of the readiness funding which were kind of stalled because of negotiations between the Green Climate Fund and I think it was UNEP. So if you could comment on this, thank you.
Okay, we can take a third question, so Betty will respond. Is there any question from the floor? Okay, if none, Beth, please, you have a floor.
Thank you, and thank you very much for the questions. So the first question in terms of having the NAPA Expo in Bonn, and I agree it does present some efficiencies when at least negotiators and many organizations are here. Since that first one, the NAPA Expo has expanded into a 3 to 4 day event, which makes it a little more challenging to tag onto a Bonn session. I think, and the leg has looked at various options for it. And we have decided that a standalone event is the better way to go, despite it may not be as cost efficient. We get different members of countries as well. Party or country representatives that aren't necessarily negotiators are able to come to the NAP Expos. That way, we're finding that it, I guess, brings a broader range of participants, and we're able to do a lot more over the number of days. With regard to the NAPs and the NDCs, I think my response has to be more of in my personal capacity than as a leg member. I don't know if the leg has developed a formal position on this. Certainly the leg sees the NAPs as the vehicle, or the process to develop the NAPs as the vehicle that will define adaptation priorities for the country. If that doesn't align with what's in the NDCs, then I think the leg would see that as problematic. Of course, there's no specific guidance on adaptation for the NDCs, but in terms of what the leg views as a country's definition of adaptation priorities, we would consider that to be the NAP. And hopefully that aligns with what is included in an NDC if a country decides to include adaptation in an NDC. Other leg members may have other views. The third question related, well, there were several questions there. Was related to the Open NAP and the relationship with the NAP guidelines. And I have not been involved directly in the Open NAP, so I'm going to have to defer that question to either the Secretariat or another leg member, but I can address the other ones. The difference between the regional training workshops and the Expo, the regional training workshops are really focused on, it's a smaller number of countries in a region, and they're focused on specific regional issues related to the NAPs, and we go much more detailed and it is a formal training. Whereas the Expo allows us to do, or allows organizations really to host different elements of the Expo on different features. So it's much more of a conference type thing than a regional training. So that's the difference there. And in terms of the readiness funding, I'm going to have to also defer that one maybe to the GCF. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Beth, for.
Just to reflect on the relation between the NAP and the NDC.
What is the micro? The micro is somewhere. Please.
Thank you so much. Only just from our experience in Palestine, the connection between the NAB and the NDC. Our NDC is now ready, and we are waiting for the final approval from the Cabinet of Ministers. What we did is we just finished the NAB, and while everything was fresh, so we took the whole NAB and we put it as the adaptation component of the NDC. I think that was the most appropriate thing, because it was just new, everything is fresh, and it is taken on board to the NDC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the contribution. Concerning the NAP, Open NAP, I will ask the Secretariat to assist. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I cannot say no to your instruction, Chair. On the relationship between the Open NAPs and the NAP technical guidelines, broadly, the Open NAPs is the mode of work, the open collaboration that brings together the interested partners to work together to support specific countries. And then in that process, they apply the technical guidelines and technical guidance that already exists. So the Open NAPs themselves, just the mode of work.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Thank you, Motsumi, for the answer. So, ladies and gentlemen, consistent with our vision, I'm glad to invite Mr. Ben Carmon from Liberia to learn more on experiences on their work on NAPs in Liberia. Ben, you have the floor. Sorry, could you get my phone with the Seraphine? My phone with Seraphine, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening to all. As you may all know, Liberia is among the least developed countries trying to build the country's resilience as it relates to climate change. And Liberia, of recent, along with NAPA, we are among the first batch of LDCs to have the approval of the GCF in terms of funding our NAP. That's the outline of the presentation, the climate change profile of the country, the GCF national profile, the current status of the GCF activities in Liberia, what are the challenges, lesson learned, and conclusion. In terms of the current status, first I will start with the profile. as per the outline. The Environmental Protection Agency is the focal agency for environmental and climate change activities in the country. In Liberia, we don't have the Ministry of Environment. So the EPA is the National Designated Authority. So at the EPA, the Executive Director of the EPA is the ND81. And then the focal point, I happen to be the focal point, I'm the NDA2. Then within the EPA2, we have a colleague of mine who's here, Jeremiah, happens to be the GCF focal point. So for us in Liberia, the major actors that are driving the GCF activities are housed within the EPA. And then we have the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, to be the multilateral, implementing entity. So that's how it is for us in Liberia. In terms of our current status of GCF activities in Liberia, when the readiness program was announced here, what we did, before the readiness program was announced, you had the NAP support program. Once it was announced, immediately we contacted UNDP to assist us, and we got, a go ahead. So for us, that's how we started the whole NAP, and GCF process. So we had UNDP as the multilateral independent, implementing entity, and we asked UNDP also to take the lead on the NAP. We immediately commenced our national stock taking. So UNDP was kind enough to assist us to do our national stock taking. And immediately after the national stock taking, as you may recall, we had the Ebola situation. And then at the same time, too, the support for the NAP was still being negotiated. There was no clear-cut decision. So there was, an impasse. So immediately that support, when we got the green light, in terms of support for the NAP, then we started, this discussion with UNDP. In the meantime, too, we also wrote the GCF through UNDP to say, look, we want to start the readiness process. So basically, we were carrying on a parallel, activities. So today, as we speak, we are accessing the GCF Readiness Fund, and we are also about, to access the NAP funding. And at the meantime, we were also engaged with UNDP that because of the coastal situation, if you see the picture there, we have the coastal issue is a major problem and has given, it has claimed the attention of national government. So we said we have to move very fast. So we contacted UNDP in terms of how do we start, at least a bigger project to address the coastal issue. So we did some work with UNDP, and then we submitted it to the Secretariat because we wanted for the Secretariat to, to know that this is a serious issue for us. And then the Secretariat, received our proposal and made preliminary comments. And after the comments made by the Secretariat, the GCF Secretariat, we came back home and then we said, look, we have to apply for the PPF because the reality was that there was some missing information, data, and that's one of our major challenges. So we are now in the process of applying for the PPF, that will provide a window for us in terms of, carrying on detailed study since we are looking at the coastal issue where we'll do, coastal modeling and other things so that will help us, to do it, resubmission, to the Secretariat. And then at the same time, too, we are talking with the UNDP, to say, look, we must build, capacity on the ground, and so we identified the Liberia Bank for Development Investment, to be, our national delivery partner. But again, we are still in discussion with GCF because GCF, has some basic fiduciary, the requirements, that they are looking at. So that has not yet been approved. We had our inception workshop for the GCF readiness and preparatory support. That was around March 2nd and 3rd of this year. I've already discussed this. But what are some of our challenges? The reality is that we have limited people that are knowledgeable about GCF. Just recently, we did a survey in terms of the population of about 4.5 billion. How many people are aware about climate change? Less than 30%. So it means that we have to do a lot of work to inform people about climate change, and especially about the GCF. There are local experts are very few. You know, the issue of data gap I did mention, and then there's need to mobilize more challenges, you know, more financial support, especially from the private sector, you know, to complement GCF funding. And then what are the lessons learned? What we did for us in Liberia, the fact that we have the major focal points are housed in one agency or in one institution, we have to reach out. So one of the major ministries, you know, we reach out to is the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, because what all we're talking about here is money. And if you don't have finance on board, I mean, it is difficult, you know, to get, you know, funding. So we, at the national level, we have good coordination among the focal points, the MIE, you know, and then what we have been doing over the years, whenever there's a regional workshop on GCF, you know, we make sure that we take somebody from the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, you know, for them to participate. So, and that has been working well for us. In 2015, the Minister of Finance and Development Planning led, you know, the national delegation to COP, you know, to COP 15 in Paris. And then after COP 15, I'm sorry, I'm talking about then after the Paris COP, then there were regional meetings, structured GCF structured dialogues. Again, we got people from the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, you know, to participate. And then recently at the last GCF meeting, the Minister of Finance led the country delegation, you know, just to go and, you know, again, present the country case and then listen to the GCF in terms of, you know, what they do and how do we, and what we can do, you know, to access funding from the GCF. So you can see the picture here, the Minister of Finance in the Ghana, along with some members of the country delegation and GCF. The lesson learned, we need to train nationals to write GCF project, because there is this, you know, overburden, especially on the MIEs, UNDP. Now, as LDCs, if we don't learn to write our own projects, we think it will be difficult for us to move very fast. So this is what, for us, now that we have UNDP taking a lead, but we are also, you know, telling them there's a need to build, you know, national capacity. And then the issue of data gaps is very, very important. If we have to move forward, then those data, you know, gaps, we have to be able to, you know, address those gaps. In conclusion, GCF provides a new window of opportunity in addressing climate change at the national level. It is anticipated that the readiness and preparatory support will enable Liberians address climate change issues at the national level. Thank you. And then you can see in the picture there at COP, at the Marrakesh COP, the president of Liberia led the country delegation. And here you see the finance minister. Actually, this is a former finance and planning minister, the present finance minister, the deputy minister for international cooperation and economic integration. The head of the EPA is there, and then Her Excellency President Ali Salif. So that's how we have been doing to make sure that we get the political leaders to understand first the issue of climate change and also to look at the issue of climate finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for the presentation. Are there any specific question to Ben's presentation? Please, what is our box? Wow.
Thank you, Benjamin, for the informative presentation. I'm Faustin Munyezikwiye, National Focal Point from Rwanda. I have one question. I saw that you managed to bring on board Ministry of Finance and Economic Planning, but I would like to know, how are you also strategizing to bring on board private sector? Do you have you already worked with them? Have you already done some approach to bring on board private sector in Liberia, so that they can also attract funds from GCF? If yes, I would like to learn from your experience. Thank you.
I will ask my colleague. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I represent Nepal, one of the early lucky countries to be assured of receiving GCF funding for NAP preparation. We have also started the NAP process through our own resources, as well support from partners, including UK aid. I acknowledge the support received from UK and the United Kingdom. We have also established a multi-stakeholder platform to bring all the stakeholders together and to enhance our understanding on climate change and the need for the NAP preparation to mainstream climate change activities in our periodic plans and policies. So far, our experience goes that the process has been quite transparent, multi-stakeholder led. The enhanced understanding and cooperation built. It has also helped to raise political level a commitment towards mainstreaming climate change, so on and so forth. With this information sharing, I would like to share one thing, that why until now, in the last decade and a half and over this period, we have not thought of expanding the leg. With the Paris Agreement in place, NDCs in place, perhaps the leg has to be expanded. It seems to be that leg is moving with one leg, only on adaptation, whereas the NDCs are also a bit of mitigation. So with this changing context, and the role of LEG has to be expanded. Otherwise, we would require many legs. This is just a thought. Thank you very much. Anybody? It's a nice ball.
Mr. Sokan, the question relating to involvement of the private sector.
All right. Thank you very much. My name is Jeremiah Sokan. I'm here to support Benjamin, the UNFCCC focal person and the lab member. So indeed, as Ben indicated, and precisely to the question, is what Liberia is doing to engage the private sector. What we started to do, first of all, to engage the private sector, we needed credibility first from the high levels of the political landscape. So now that we have it, in recent, the fund that we got the readiness to strengthen the capacity of NDA, help us to move through all the process, the political meetings and all the different political actors. So now we're already now moving into the second phase of it. As a matter of fact, by the 20th of this month, we will be engaging all major companies, CEOs in the country. At this time, with the support of the Minister of Finance and Commerce, as well as the President Project Delivery Unit and the National Investment Commission. So now that we have them on board, so by the 20th of this month, we're going to meet them. The point is to present to them what the significance of GCF funding, and also like financial institution to see how well we can utilize them for them to work with the fund in such a way that they can try to find other means of not only contributing to the development landscape, but also taking advantage of all the different financial products that the financial GCF offer and that they can help to do. So we have all that already worked out. So for us was just a first step at a time. So at least we accomplished the first step, that we got a political backing, political will at the highest level. Now we can leverage that and pull them together and then also get. So plans are already on our way for that, for a real nationwide consultation. Besides that, we also engaging the civil society to be part to understand that not only from our fiscal budget, but we can find a way to use our fiscal space as well as other resources that are available to transform our development landscape. So that's what we're doing.
Okay. Thank you very much for the answer. Let us thank Beth and Ben for the presentation, and call to the podium Mr. Clifford and Mr. Dastan. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite Mr. Clifford Polycarp to provide us with an update on support to the LDCs on adaptation under the GCF. In line with our vision of saying NAPs formulated by 2018 and at least by 2020, we also want to see the LDCs being able to access funding for formulation of NAPs from the GCF and other sources. Mr. Clifford, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity to present, the invitation and the opportunity to present. What I'll try and do this evening very briefly is to give you a snapshot view of how the GCF views the support for adaptation planning in the context of adaptation programming with the GCF, and also give you a sense of what we're seeing as demand from different countries, as well as some of the work we've been doing on providing more guidelines to the countries around adaptation planning, and lastly also talk a little bit through the steps in the process for countries to access support for adaptation planning. Let me start with what I like to refer to as the planning programming continuum. While there has been this felt need for adaptation planning support, very often at the end of the line, what you're looking for is the projects that you identify through this planning exercise that can be funded. And the way for us to look at it in the GCF context is through this sort of planning programming continuum. So of course it starts with the NAPs as an adaptation planning tool for the country. among other strategies and planning processes. And very often these exercises are led by either the climate change focal points or planning agencies in countries. But when you start to come to the GCF, these priorities need to translate into what you're going to do with the GCF funding. And we refer to that as the GCF country program. And this exercise is led by the National Designated Authority or focal point in the country. And so Liberia was a good example of two different units within the EPA, one leading more on the climate change process and potentially the climate change planning process as well, in close concert with the Planning and Finance Ministry. And then the NDA leading on the GCF engagement and programming exercise. The GCF country programs are meant to serve as a signal to the accredited entities of the GCF who bring projects on behalf of countries to for approval. And we're going through this exercise with our accredited entities in parallel to identify, to help build on what the countries have identified as their priorities that emerge from a planning exercise. And ultimately what we want to get to is the projects and programs that can be funded, which are brought to us by the accredited entities. And in this context, we're talking primarily about adaptation projects. So while this is a continuum, one should not look at it as a sequential exercise, because in many countries, you've already gone through these processes in different ways and have already identified priority adaptation projects that can be brought to the GCF. And indeed, a number of countries have done so, and we've funded a number of projects already. About a third of our portfolio is for adaptation only projects, but it's closer to 50% because a number of projects have both adaptation and mitigation benefits. So now let me come to the mandate and the developments around adaptation planning. The Paris COP provided this mandate to the GCF to expedite support to formulate and implement national adaptation plans. Last year, in the middle of last year in June, our board met and decided that the NDAs and focal points of the GCF and basically invited them to start submitting requests for funding for adaptation planning processes. And this avenue was opened through the readiness program with a country cap of up to $3 million. But the window was also left open to go down the adaptation window if a number of countries wanted to band together in a program with an accredited entity. We got to Morocco, the COP in Morocco. By then we had formal expressions of interest from about 20, the NDAs and focal points of 20 countries. And we were in a position to have reviewed and approved two of the first proposals for adaptation planning. My colleague from Nepal called himself one of the two lucky ones, but they were one of the two hardworking ones that were the early movers to get together a proposal and bring it to the GCF and see it through the approval process. Where are we in 2017? It's only been 4 months, but in these 4 months, we've had another 16 countries put together draft proposals for us. And we're now working with each of them closely to, in an iterative way, to make sure that these proposals are designed in a way that we are able to formally process and approve it. And this is the distribution of countries that have brought forward these proposals to us. Many of these are with the agencies that you've worked with in the previously, but there are a few countries that have chosen to access support for adaptation planning directly, so using the direct access route as well. The last few months, we've also been working internally within the Secretariat, and we've received feedback from different colleagues as well that have been working on adaptation planning, on providing, let's say, guidelines or better sort of guidance on what the GCF could support on adaptation planning. And this has really been an exercise to provide some sort of, I would say, a priori signaling and guidance on possible support, but it's not meant to be a constraint or a straitjacket. We recognize that each country's circumstance is quite different and the needs will vary in each country. And certainly we've seen that diversity in the 16 countries that are developing adaptation planning proposals for us. Some looking at just focusing on a sector, others looking at adaptation planning at the subnational level. So there's quite a diversity that we're already seeing. Notwithstanding that, we've gone through this exercise of helping develop some guidelines to steer countries. And this is just one element of it. It's probably the most sort of salient element of those guidelines that are still in draft form and emerging. But here's what we've converged on broadly thus far in terms of what might be outcomes that the GCF supports on adaptation planning. There's a recognition that the governance and coordination of the adaptation planning exercise, and there are various layers to that, is an important outcome for the GCFs to support. The assessments of the vulnerability and risk and the analysis that goes with it is going to be also a very important piece of what the GCF would support on in the context of adaptation planning. Knowledge systems, information systems, and communication is key as you engage with a diversity of stakeholders, try and understand their needs, feed it back into the planning exercise. And of course, then the centerpiece is the policy and the strategy development itself, or integration of it within other planning processes, be it the national development planning processes or sectoral planning processes. The fifth element is the financing plan for adaptation. The planning exercise would be futile if it didn't have a robust investment plan to go alongside the priorities that have been identified in a scientific and robust manner. And that's another aspect that we see ourselves supporting, not just to access the GCF, but to access other sources of finance as well, local, international, public, and private. And lastly, we also see the support going towards monitoring and evaluation, particularly towards learning and ensuring that as countries go through these cycles of planning, that the lessons learned from the implementation of earlier plans there's a way of feeding that back into future plans. So this has been some work that we've been doing as well over the last several weeks, and hope that it will culminate very soon. We have draft a very sort of solid draft of this that we're going through internally through a peer review exercise. Sorry, this is repeated. Okay. Lastly, I just want to sort of talk through the process, at least within the readiness window of the GCF. It follows the same cycle as the readiness program. So we have the submissions of these proposals that need to come to us from the NDA. It could come with an existing accredited entity or a partner that we've already established as a delivery partner for readiness, or the NDA may choose to identify a local institution that they feel is competent to lead on this exercise and manage the process in the country. We put them through what we call the FMCA, which is the Financial Management Capacity Assessment. So it's a very basic check on their fiduciary procurement capacities to entrust that entity with the resources. We've moved to an submission cycle that's quarterly. So we've got 4 sort of intake deadlines during the course of the year. So the last one just passed on April 30th, and the next one's coming up in July 31st. The consideration of proposals for adaptation planning is done within the Secretariat. There's delegated authority from the board. So we do not need to take these proposals to the board. We process them, review and process them internally. And the executive director of the GCF, the head of the Secretariat, has the authority to decide whether to approve with conditions or not approve the proposal, or they can delegate this decision making to other officers in the Secretariat. We've committed to making decisions within a month of the deadline for receiving proposals. So for all of the proposals that we've received as of April 30th, we have committed to make a decision by May 31st. And that decision would be to approve with conditions, or to ask for a resubmission if the changes need to be substantive. But we've committed to do that within a month. Once we have approved proposals, we need to enter into legal arrangements for institutions where we already have pre-existing legal arrangements. We do not need to enter into these arrangements again. We can use those existing legal arrangements. And then we have, for new agreements, the requirement of securing what we call a legal opinion, is to ensure that the agreement that we signed is binding and enforceable. We ask for a request for disbursement from the entity that's going to be managing the resources, and an authorization of those disbursement requests by the appropriate signatories within the institution. And once we have that, we're able to process and make payments. So that's the process. We're hoping with the proposals that we have in churn right now, the 16 that I mentioned, that we'd be able to make decisions on a handful of them this month itself. Not all of them have been sent to us sufficiently in advance, or we haven't had chance to work on all of them. Some of them we've been working with the countries for a number of weeks now, but some of them are relatively new, and those will likely take a bit longer to reach a shape and form that we can approve. But I'm certainly hoping that during the course of this month, we're able to approve another 4 to 6 proposals. Don't hold me to that, but we're definitely aiming for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. Is there any question to this presentation from the floor? Okay. First one, please. You have.
Yeah, thank you, Clifford. I have just one question. Thank you for the presentation. On submission, you said that we can use either FMCA or delivery partner. So my question is, if a country submitted the readiness proposal through NDA and accessed the, for instance, 200,000 can submit the second one through delivery partner to attract the 100,000 remaining, or it is just one package. Once you started with the NDA, you can continue with the NDA, or you can split so that you can make sure that you exhaust 1 million. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rajan from Nepal. Actually, I work with Clean Energy Nepal. So actually, there was it was mentioned in the earlier presentation that there was a negotiation between UN agency and GCF about the fees. So if that is true, like, is that applicable for the LDCs country? So that is one question. On the other hand, like actually Nepal is preparing its NAP, and as mentioned by one colleagues from Nepal, that we were actually able to secure some of the fund to prepare its NAP, but the deadline has come to end. So the deadline was just for 2 years, and that is started from 2015. And Nepal is also desperately waiting for the GCF fund. So, but it is not channelized yet. So in that confusion, like for LDC countries, how long that we have to wait for such confusion process? Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clifford. You have the floor to respond to the question.
Okay, to Faustin, your question, what I didn't have slides on today and perhaps should have is some clarity on the readiness funding that's available. There's up to $1 million per country per year for a range of readiness activities that the country may want to undertake, whether it's strengthening the NDA, whether it's developing your country program, whether it's building your pipeline, developing concepts, supporting your entities to get accredited. So there's a whole host of activities that a country may request readiness resources for in order to get ready to access the funds from the GCF. And in some of these, it might also be, sort of mobilizing your private sector, convening them. So there's a whole host of activities. And the overall cap for that is $1 million a year. Separate from that $1 million a year cap, there is a $3 million cap per country. It's not an annual cap, it's a per country cap for adaptation planning. So if you look at it over, say, a three-year period, you can potentially access readiness 1 million, 1 million, 1 million for 3 years, plus 3 million for adaptation. So you're potentially looking at as much as 6 million over a 3-year period for all of your readiness needs, including for adaptation planning. Now, of course, in some countries, they may choose to bundle it all together because it makes sense to work through one implementing institution to do it. And that implementing institution could be local, it could be international, yeah? But in most cases, you will want to go to the right kind of institution for the right, for the activity. So you might choose that, okay, your work around private sector mobilization and concept development, pipeline development there's a certain kind of entity like your National Development Bank that might be the best suited delivery partner. Or for other kinds of activities such as getting institutions accredited, you may choose to do that through Minirena, because they're already gone through that accreditation experience and can understand how to guide other entities that might want to seek accreditation. In still other cases, you want to do some sectoral work around adaptation planning or even national adaptation planning, and you might choose one of the sort of UN agencies that have the right capacities in that area, the right networks in that area. So it really is up to you to decide whether you want to divvy up that resources in a way that it makes sense with different partners, whether you want to implement it, you know, in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. The choice is yours. So what you need to do is just sort of, the resources available, sit back and think about what your different needs are and work out whether one institution or a certain set of institutions can help you advance different priorities. To the question about, so I hope that addresses it. If not, we can talk bilaterally faster. On the question from the colleague from Nepal, the two. One is on the issue of the fees. Now, let me explain what's been the issue with, I would say, particularly the UN agencies. We have, the GCF has a policy on fees. It's an interim policy on fees, and that caps the fees we can provide to delivery partners for readiness at 10%. What we've learned as we've worked with the UN agencies in particular is that they see the need to add on, in addition to the fees, what they refer to as project management costs. And we don't have a policy on project management costs, at least not yet. So we've been working to find a solution in a way that keeps these sort of fees plus project management costs at a reasonable level. And we just concluded this exercise, at least on an interim basis, as of last week. And we've agreed for the interim period that we will take the approach that Jeff has taken with fees and project management costs. And we will, over the course of the coming months, do a more thorough review and consultation on what should be the right levels of fees and project management costs for the GCF. So I wouldn't say we've been negotiating with the entities. We've been trying to understand from them what their policies are, what their requirements are, and based on that, looked at what other funds are doing, particularly Jeff, and I've come up with an interim approach that we believe should be a way forward, at least in the short term. In terms of the disbursement for Nepal, Nepal's proposal was approved in November. However, there were some things that were missing, but we didn't want to stop the approval. So what we did was we approved the proposal and we attached a couple of requirements, which we said, once you address that, we can then move forward with the disbursements. One such thing was the procurement plan. In middle of April, I think it was around 12th or 13th of April, we got the revised proposal from UNEP on behalf of Nepal with these missing elements that were not available last year. We've now reviewed that and deemed that to be adequate, and we will be, as I mentioned to the colleague from Nepal at the LDC briefing earlier today, we will be sending during the course of this week a confirmation that those requirements have now been met, which should then allow Nepal and UNEP to send us the first disbursement request.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Clifford, for that, the answers. We now turn to Mr. Destan to provide us with an update to support to LDCs through the LDCF. Mr. Destan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the invitation, and I'm very sorry we've run a little behind schedule, but I'll be very brief. I promise it will only take 5 minutes, so thank you very much for paying attention. Let me just get this away. The LDCF has to date received around $1.22 billion in pledges. That includes pledges from sovereign nations and subnational entities as well, including Quebec. Total paid contributions amount to $1.17 billion, so there are some pledges outstanding to be paid. I think we amount to around $43.7 million at the moment. We have funded 249 projects. So I noticed earlier today in the presentation by Ms. Lavender from LEC, it was 248. That's because earlier today we just submitted another LDCF PIF for the review of the LDCF Council, which was in South Sudan. So it hasn't been approved yet, but it was circulated today for funding. So I hope we can announce the funding approval soon. The number of countries is 51 due to the number of the LDCs. The funds available for new approvals as of April 30th, and that's based on the report by the trustee, is $66.8 million. However, that does not take into account several projects that were circulated to Council for approval and which haven't been approved yet. So once they have been approved, that number will decrease. But at the moment, the report from the Council, from the trustee, is $66.8 million. We have approved since January, so that means since COP22, $129.4 million, and that includes the South Sudan project that was circulated today, so I wouldn't consider it approved, but I'll just include it here for a matter of clarity. The technically cleared project pipeline as of today amounts to $146.1 million, excluding the South Sudan project. And that means we have 23 projects in the pipeline of technically cleared projects. About the South Sudan project, just to highlight very briefly that the project will work in those areas also where the root causes of conflict among communities is access to natural resources, for example, forests, water points, and grazing land. And climate change really is an added stressor to hardship and displacement there. So local peace building will be promoted using the natural resource base, such as reforestation, as the basis for rebuilding key relationships and the common vision of the country. The project is also co-financed by $30 million in grants from the recipient country itself. So I hope we will be able to announce the approval of this project soon. This graph depicts the total annual and cumulative funding approvals under the LDCF. You can see there's some variations. As I had explained in previous sessions, the LDCF is based on voluntary contributions. It does not have a replenishment cycle. So whenever a country feels or another alternative source feels like it's ready to support the LDCF and make a pledge, then it can step forward and make a pledge and then turn that into a contribution. So that causes some variations here. In fiscal year 16, which ends next month, at the end of next month, we have approved or forwarded for approval $154.6 million. So that's since last July. That's much more than last year, so I'm very pleased with that development. In terms of financing by sector, it hasn't changed much. I'm sure you have mostly heard that before. Agriculture is most prominent due to the LDCF being focused on the LDCs and agriculture being one of the priorities of the LDCs due to climate change impacting mostly the basic natural resources and agriculture that livelihoods depend upon. So this is based on the NAPA priorities. Second to that, we have natural resource management and coastal zone management. This is a list of countries that for which we processed LDCF projects just since the last COP. That would be since November. which amount to a total of $129.4 million, and that includes the South Sudan project at the very bottom, which you can see, which I think was around $10 million in total LDCF resources. We have recently published an updated progress report on the LDCF and the SCCF. It's on our website. So here, that's an excerpt of the progress report. You can see that we expect that at the very, very minimum, the active portfolio, those projects that are already under implementation, would benefit at least an approximate 19.9 million people in the LDCs. And I'm not going to delve into the rest. I think you've heard this before, but I would refer you to our website if you like further details, or send me an email if you need background on any of the figures. In terms of addressing the remaining elements of the LDC work program, and that has been a request by the COP. So here, as with everything else, we follow COP guidance, which is essentially what countries agree upon at each COP, is that we build capacity for LDCs to participate effectively in intergovernmental climate change processes, and we have approved a project for this purpose in the past. I think that has come to an end just last summer, I think August or September. Support for public awareness, tech transfer, and climate information services is routinely provided in the context of NAPA implementation. So usually that's an integral part of the project proposals that we receive from LDCs. And that is in response to the demand from the LDCs. Now we have received also guidance to support the initiation of the NAP process in countries. I'd like to emphasize it's a process, so it's not necessarily that we provide funding as for national communications or BRs, where you see sort of one distinct end product that can be submitted. I mean, some countries choose to do that, others do not, but in the end, it's really about, I think, mainstreaming adaptation considerations into development frameworks, and that is a process, an iterative process. So for that, we have approved several NAP projects. In particular for LDCs, the Global Support Program very prominently, and I hope that those LDCs that are in the room here have benefited from it already. We have approved 2 phases, and I think it was very important in particular to raise adaptation on the agendas at the national level in developing countries, and also to be able to provide information to donors as to the resources that are needed for the implementation of those NAPs in the future. In addition to that, we have approved what I would call single country NAP projects. And I would like to point out that these projects are often mixed NAPA implementation and NAP development projects. And that is for a very simple reason, because, and that has been pointed out earlier today, NAP processes are dependent on accurate data and information, for instance, for decision makers to be able to really understand the climate threats and impacts on their development frameworks, and to then be able to take the appropriate decision to integrate it. And for that matter, for instance, some projects or some LDCs choose to combine a NAP development with, let's say, a climate information services installment on the ground that can provide the better information to the decision makers in order for them to be able to better understand also the climate change impacts on the economy. And so here's a list of the single country NAP projects, just some examples, and you will be able to access this presentation afterwards online. So let me skip over the individual names, since I'm sure I'm standing between you and dinner. So relevant COP22 decisions, there were many. So this is a short selection. There's a decision on matters relating to the LDCs, which, among many other things, urged additional contributions to the LDCF. There's a decision on national adaptation plans, which welcomed the support provided by the CHEF for the process to formulate and implement NAPs, and also encourages developed country parties to contribute to the LDCF. And I think it says, and to other funds. recognizing the importance of the process to formulate and implement national adaptation plans. And then there was also a decision on the report of the CHEF to the COP and guidance to the CHEF, which also included a reference to the LDCF as well. So there's a variety of decisions that references this fund, which I think really depicts its importance for the LDCs. A recent developments, Quebec is not so recent anymore, but since it has been a novum, I think among multilateral adaptation funds back when the contribution when the pledge was made in Paris, I've included it here. Quebec did pledge and contribute already $6 million to the LDCF. We have received some interest from US states as well to potentially consider pledging in the future. This is not something that actually we have pursued ourselves, but of course, if the funding comes our way, we will be very open and encourage those submissions. So let's see what happens there. I'm unable to provide any additional information at this point. So since that's in the process, Wallonia has pledged also together with Belgium, I think $3.25 million at the last COP. I think Belgium has pledged twice 7 million and another 20-something million at the council meeting in October and then at the COP. So I've listed Belgium here on the recent pledges. Japan has pledged and contributed already, so they made their payment to the LDCF just last month. I think it was last month. So that's absolutely new and additional. This also hasn't been announced at any COP. So we are very pleased to see this support and also this recognition of the priorities of the LDCs and the most urgent adaptation needs in those countries. I've added Sweden here. Sweden was kind enough to top up its COP21 pledge with another 50 million Swedish kroner at COP22 and has that paid in full as well. So thank you for that. With that, I would like to thank you. Thanks for staying on. I really appreciate that. There is the progress report on our website. There are some other council documents as well. And here's my email address. If you have any questions, as always, please do not hesitate to send me an email at any point in time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Destan. For the floor, is there any question to his presentation? No question. We are late about 20 minutes. We apologize for that, for taking your times. Adam, please, Adam.
Thank you very much, Dustin, and also Polycarp. I have one question with regard to NAP's proposals that have been putting in place, but it's quite long because of financial limitation at the LDCF. So can we take some of them to be part of NAP under the GCF then? I've discussed this issue with Mr. Polycarp when we had a meeting in Bali, but I would like to see from both of you. Thank you.
Any other question, or can I ask Mr. Destan to respond to the question? Another question, please.
Let me thank, first of all, Jeff and GCF for your presentation. My question goes directly to Jeff. Based on what I see, you say up to about April, you still have, April 2017, you still have about $66 million available. Now, and you said there are a couple of projects that the board is still looking at, and I'm not sure whether that or those projects cost is kind of factor in anywhere, or but what I'm looking for is if you take the project, or you have any idea of the project, and if you take out the project under consideration, what will you be netting as cash available that countries could compete for? That's one. The second thing is under the LDCF, especially in the NAPA framework, some countries, I think there was a ceiling, and some countries did not hit the ceiling then. That particular case, it was Liberia. On that, then we had the opportunity to reach up to 30 million, but we did not even go halfway. The question is, do you, I see our priorities, our flexibility, if countries like that come back, because under the NAPA framework, there are certain projects that are still not finished, and funds finished. Can they reintroduce those projects, finish them up? Is there some consideration, or what is it there for them? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. Who will start? The question was for. Okay, for you. Okay, please, Mr. Dassan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for these questions. I hope I understood them correctly. If not, please correct me, and then I'll try to answer again. To pick up on the Liberia question first, from the private sector representative from Liberia, we have a flexible ceiling under the LDCF, and that is in order to ensure that not one or two countries access all the resources. That's its main purpose. And the ceiling has been increased just last year from 30 million to 40 million because many countries actually hit that ceiling and were not able to program further resources. So it is really meant to sort of ensure some equitable access because it is the fund for the LDCs, and LDCs have traditionally had problems in accessing international resources. So with that, we are still open for business. So you are invited to submit your project proposals. I think, made clear the pipeline of technically clear projects, the available resources that we have in the trust fund, and that we receive voluntary contributions at sort of random periods in time. So bearing that in mind, absolutely, please do submit your projects if those are your country priorities. In terms of the question on NAPs and complementarity with the GCF, we have had consultations with the Green Climate Fund. We have intensified those also in the last half year or something along those lines, I think, since the new leadership took office. And there are a number of strategic considerations going on in terms of working together in countries. So, for example, we have discussed the joint country missions, maybe in a select set of recipient countries. There might be some joint pilot programming for some countries. These are things, we have a list, I think, with 9 action points. Those were 2. And we will be trying to implement those in the future. But very concretely on the NAP process, it is very important that whatever funding you access from one of these 2 funds is complementary to what you access from the other, if you do choose to access funding from both funds. So we personally ask in the project review. In the project review cycle, there's a section on coordination with other initiatives, and we ask this specifically to point out also other funding requests that are in development as well, and that includes the GCF. So we hope that you as a country also try to be complementary in the way you access resources, but in the end, the country's in the driver's seat. So I hope that will be the case. If we can do anything to help you with that, we will be very pleased to do that. I think for NAP projects, as I said, it's an iterative process. So it does not necessarily mean that a one-time, one-off funding of, let's say, $1 or $3 million means that you can never in the future access resources from any other financial mechanism. Just taking into account the sheer number of financing mechanisms, including all the bilaterals that are out there, and providing support. So what is important is that any funding that's accessed is actually complementary to whatever else is going on in your country. And for instance, if a bilateral entity from a donor country already works with you on NAP processes, then maybe that can be a good basis for developing a NAP project for the GCF or the GEF. In addition to that, I'll just leave it at that for the moment. So if you have any more questions, I'll be happy to discuss that.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you all for your presence in this side event. Thank you also for the part you are supporting the work of the leg. And with this, I declare close this side event. Thank you very much.